A very warm welcome. You're watching Oneindia English with me, Anupati Gaur, and in this special episode, on this special day of World Suicide Prevention Day 2020, we will focus on how sensitive this issue is and how suicides can be prevented. I'm joined by Dr. Sumedha Tiwari, who's a consultant psychiatrist. Thanks a lot for joining us, ma'am.
Thank you so much for having me here.
So today is the World Suicide Prevention Day. We all understand that suicide is a very sensitive issue right now, especially because we're facing the coronavirus lockdown, coronavirus pandemic, and it has affected our mental health. So how do you see this entire issue of suicide, that the entire focus of this particular day is to encourage people to talk more about suicide, to talk more about mental health, to create awareness and tell people that suicides can be prevented. So what is your take on it as a psychiatrist, that how suicides can be prevented?
Anubhuti, suicides largely happen a lot of times because people don't recognize that they are suffering from mental illnesses. Their families don't recognize, and even if they do, they don't encourage their family members to visit a psychiatrist because there is so much of stigma that is attached to going to a psychiatrist. Pagal ka doctor hai and things like that, and that sadly ends up in people, ending their life by suicide. And largely, in a lot of cases, if treatment was sought, timely intervention was given, these suicides are preventable. But sadly, these things happen, and there's so many patients who've been coming to me in this lockdown and who've told me that a number of times that they felt suicidal, like, doc, I felt suicidal, I don't know what to do. So yes, it is a cause of concern, and yes, people need to take this issue very seriously, especially because a lot of suicides are preventable. So yeah, that's what I'd like to say.
So suicide in itself is a very sensitive issue, and not everybody feels comfortable about talking about it. And also, we will not realize that the person is really having so many mental issues, of course, because unless and until the person reaches out to us and shares that with us. So it kind of becomes very difficult, and also a person might have suicidal thoughts, but at the same time, since the person is not really convinced that he would actually end up committing suicide, they kind of refrain from discussing it with a lot of people because they know that there is a stigma involved and people will view them differently after knowing that. So what are the kind of first symptoms that we should look for in friends, families, or colleagues where we know that there are certain mental issues, but if the person is suicidal or not?
So, Anupati, the most common cause of suicide is depression. And for depression, the thing that we do look for is if a person who was generally very cheerful has now started remaining aloof, has gone into his or her own shell. They are sad on most days. They are not themselves. They are irritable. They snap at you. A lot of people will tell you that they are hopeless. They feel helpless about a situation. They don't see a way out. So that's kind of a cry for help. They are asking for your help, but they cannot directly ask for your help for whatever reason. Then there's a change in eating habits. There's a change in sleeping habits. There's a feeling of worthlessness. There might be guilt. There might be crying spells. People become very sensitive to issues that they previously were not sensitive to. And there's a general sense of discomfort in anything that they do. Then there is something which is called as suicidal ideation. Suicidal ideation means a person thinks about suicide, that isse acha to hai ki I should just end my life. There is something which is called as a passive death wish, which is that there's no active effort on the person's end to take his or her life. There's just Bhagwan mujhe utha le, things like that. Isse acha to Bhagwan mujhe utha le. Then there's something which is called as a suicidal plan, which is a person has started seeking out ways, or he or she might just Google this up, ways to commit suicide or how to die a painless death or things like that. In the Google history, you see a lot of these patients who die by suicide. So they're thinking about it. And while they're thinking about it, a lot of times we've seen that people, of course, this is all in retrospect, that we've seen that people who were thinking about suicide have started giving away stuff, like they've made their will, or they've given their personal belongings to people who they love, or they wanted to give it to, or they'll call up their friends or call up their families, that with a very emotional it'll be a very emotional conversation, that I was bad to you, I've done a lot of things wrong, mujhe maaf kar dena, and things like that. So these are probably the last steps which are before the person eventually ends up their lives. And finally there is suicide. And uh, so yeah, these are the symptoms which a depressed person will show. But there are
Yeah.
other causes of suicide too. There are other causes, like schizophrenia is another cause of suicide, and the reason in schizophrenia is different, and the treatment, the main way how you can prevent that suicide is purely by treatment of schizophrenia,
Yeah.
the primary illness. The fact that you said that people don't reach out and that suicide, the wish is not expressed. The thing is that a lot of times people think that if we talk about suicide, we might implant that idea into the other person's head. Maybe he or she is not thinking about suicide, but हमने पूछ लिया तो शायद they'll start thinking about suicide. So we don't want to put that idea into their head.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the thing here is that they already have their idea. If you talk to them compassionately about it, if you're very sensitive about the whole issue when you're having that conversation, they'll probably express that wish to them. They'll probably break down in front of you. And I've seen that happening. So don't shy away from asking a person who you feel is going through some tough issues in their lives to ask about suicide. Don't shy away from asking that question. Be sensitive
Yeah.
about it, but why not? Ask them. Tell them that you're there for them. Ask them about suicide.
Yeah. So we've seen that a lot of people kind of are shy of visiting a psychiatrist. They don't want anyone to come to know that they have been visiting a psychiatrist because of the stigma involved, and they know that for a fact that they will be under the scanner of the family, friends, and colleagues if somebody comes to know that they have been seeking help. So that is not the reason why many people refrain from it. They, other than that, what they do is they Google things up. They start giving themselves medications on their own. So how dangerous do you think that pattern is when the person is not seeking out professional help, but instead starts treating himself? Do you think that could also lead up to suicide later on because the real issues are not really solved?
Yeah, it could. I mean, self-treatment, self-medication is, of course, harmful, and especially with psychiatric medicines, it is harmful. You don't know what could happen if you take a medicine if you take overdose of a medicine. And we've had cases where people have overdosed on psychiatric medicines itself. So yes, if you don't get treatment from the right sources, which are your doctors and other mental health professionals, psychiatrists, psychologists, counselors, if you don't go to them, you don't know what road you're taking. We don't know that. So yeah, that is a risk. Instead of, but I'll tell you something, that yeah, we know that it is a stigma, and psychiatrists, there is a doctor-patient confidentiality when it comes to psychiatrists. A psychiatrist is probably, if you visit a cardiologist and they happen to meet you at parties, they'll just wave a hand, and you'll also wave a hand and you say, "Hi doc, how are you?" But you'll shy away from saying, greet a psychiatrist, your psychiatrist. So that is something that we take very seriously. Doctor-patient confidentiality. Whatever you are telling me or a psychiatrist, we are not going to disclose that information unless and until the only one thing that prevents us from breaching this confidentiality clause is if there is, we suspect that there is you could cause harm to yourself, that is by suicide, or you could be harmful to others, so these are the only two situations. Otherwise there's complete confidentiality. So if people are listening to this and if people are shying away because of this reason, so please don't. Have faith and have trust in your doctor. They are not going to disclose anything about you to anyone.
Yeah.
So yeah, visit the doctor.
Yeah. So as a psychiatrist, I'm sure that at this point of time, you must be taking a lot of such cases where people are facing mental issues. So what are the kind of tips you would like to give to people if they're suddenly feeling very low, if they are facing kind of mental pressure, mental issues, what is it that they should do?
See, everybody in this lockdown is going through a tough time. It is a tough time because people are working from home, the workload has increased, you are staying with your family, you're not accustomed to staying long hours with your family. There are issues between your spouse and you, there are issues between your parents and you. And this is all because you are not accustomed to spending a lot of time with these people, and now you're forced to do that. There's no help, there's no house help, there's no maids, you have to do ghar ka kaam and your house, your office work and everything. So that's already taking a toll on you. And on top of that, if there were any pre-existing mental health issues, so this is what I have seen is that during the lockdown, there are some people who have developed mental health issues, but majorly a lot of patients who are coming to us are the ones who already had these issues, and
Yeah.
now they have been exacerbated because of the lockdown. So to people who are facing these issues, I'd like to tell them that involve your family, involve your friends, whatever is your social circle, just open up to them if you can, to people. And having said this, it is difficult for a person who's suffering from a mental illness to open up to a lot of people. So to the
Yeah.
people who are around that person, your friends, your relatives, just give them a call, ask them how they are doing, tell them that you're there for them if they need you, and if you really mean that you are there for them. So tell them that you're there. Just let people know that in times of need you will be there. And apart from that, of course, have a basic. People need to have a basic schedule, and need to just understand that this lockdown is all temporary. And apart from that, of course, there are mental health professionals, there are psychologists, there are doctors, there are psychiatrists who are there for you, who are there. And these days, the good thing is that a lot of people are available online through teleconsultation. So you don't even
Yeah.
need to step out of your house. If you're worried about that, people will think, where am I going? Why am I talking to a doctor? So just
Yeah.
pick up your phone, place a video call, book an appointment, talk to a psychiatrist, talk to a psychologist, and that's it. Like, you're
Yeah.
sorted.
So one interesting thing I would like to ask you, that in many cases what happens is that when you have a fight with anyone who's very close to you, maybe your parents, your friends, then sometimes what happens is that people tend to threaten you with suicide, that if you don't do this then I will commit suicide. Now that becomes very tricky for a person to understand, that you are kind of getting blackmailed into doing something because the other person is threatening you with suicide. You do not know how sincere their intentions are, whether they would end up doing it or not. That still remains a mystery. So how should a person react in such a case, like somebody is kind of blackmailing you, threatening you that they will commit suicide? Now if they actually commit suicide, then you will feel that baggage the rest of your life, you will blame yourself. So how should a person react in such a case?
So see, when this is called impulsive or deliberate self-harm. So basically, when this happens, so two things: either it is impulsive deliberate self-harm, that the person is so worked up, he or she doesn't know what to do. So in that moment, they do the impulsive thing. They either cut themselves, or they threaten ki I'll drink phenyl or I'll whatever. So
Yeah.
this is one thing. The other thing is that the person knows that I want something. Like in a lot of drug addicts, we see this, that they'll ask for money because they need to procure their drug, and then they'll threaten their families with this ki suicide kar lunga, kaat lunga, this and that. See, every self harm is a risk factor for suicide. So we need to take every self harm seriously. While I agree that you can't keep giving into the manipulations of that person,
Yeah.
but the thing is that that person who's doing this needs help from a professional. They need professional help. Take him or her to a psychiatrist or a psychologist, and they need to develop basically healthy coping mechanisms, because this is like a very maladaptive behavior that they're doing, and because they've been repeatedly probably doing it, it has become ingrained in their memory that this is going to get me whatever I want. And
Hmm.
also the other thing is that we've seen is that kids, they model the behavior of their parents. So
Yeah.
let's say if they've seen their mother or their father doing the same thing, the
Hmm.
chances that they will do it increases. So
Yeah.
that is another thing that we need to take care of. So this is actually, yes, you don't know who might actually take it up the notch, who might actually end up dying because of the things that they're doing, all this manipulation. So to be on the safer side, just ensure that the person is safe at that point. Just take away any sharp object that's there with that person,
Hmm.
or any sort of poison that you think a person can drink or overdose on medicines. Just keep all that away and take him or her to a doctor. And
Hmm.
if need be, if it's an emergency, just take him or her to an emergency room, keep him there overnight, and then you can have an appointment with a psychiatrist the other.
Yeah. So one more interesting question, that we've seen a lot of times that when somebody loses their loved ones to suicide, it is a kind of grief that stays with them forever. And we have seen that how the parents who lose their child to suicide, of course, they are haunted by that question, that why couldn't they save their child? Why didn't the child come up to them and share his or her issues? Or why didn't they pay a closer attention? And what happens is that, not in every case, in some cases, we've seen that when your closest person commits suicide, that person also commits suicide, because the person cannot take that kind of grief. They keep on blaming themselves. So how should a person, as a psychiatrist, like, what should you say to a person who's just lost a close one to suicide, how to handle that grief and how not to keep on blaming themselves the rest of their lives?
uh, this is a very difficult situation, for parents to see their kids die in front of their eyes, because kids are not supposed to die before their parents do. By suicide, more so, because if it is an accident, we are like, chalo theek hai, accident ho gaya, you can't really do much about it.
Hmm.
One, the awareness about mental health in this country and in general about mental illnesses is, I would say, abysmal. So be open to the problems of your kids. Let them know that you are there for them. And if sadly an incident like a suicide happens in the family, uh, know that it was not your fault. It is very difficult, Anubhuti. I'm again telling you that it is very difficult. Like, I've seen my own personal, family, people in my family and friends. I've seen them go into depression. So,
Hmm.
immediately seek help from mental health professionals if you feel that a person whose family member has died of suicide is also spiraling down to depression. Immediately seek mental health help from mental health professionals. But also a very strong support system is required. A very strong support
Yeah.
system.
So just to wrap up the discussion, what is your message to everybody on this World Suicide Prevention Day 2020?
My message on this World Suicide Prevention Day is that, guys, this is a very extreme step. Your problems can be solved. Just ask for help if you can. If not, then go to a mental health professional. There are many in our country, and thanks to the internet, they are very accessible. And to people who are not suffering from mental illnesses, please show more empathy towards your friends and families who you think might be suffering from some mental health issue. Don't make fun of people with mental illness. Don't judge them, and don't judge mental health professionals too. I mean, people say things like psychiatrist has a pagal ka doctor, which is why patients probably don't go to doctors thinking, yeah, I'm not mad, I'm a strong person, I don't need mental health, any help when it comes to my mental health. So yeah, just in general, a sense of inclusion of mental health as an aspect of your.
Yeah. Thanks a lot for joining us, and I hope this discussion was helpful to all those people who are watching it. Today is the World Suicide Prevention Day. Go out and tell people, I mean, not go out actually, but tell your friends and family about the suicide. prevention, and also create awareness. If somebody needs to talk to you about anything, be a friend. If you feel that someone is going through any kind of mental issues,